Hi guys, good evening. Thank you very much for your time tonight. I'm Sam Wood. I'm an entrepreneur and a social entrepreneur. So let me just tell you a little bit about, for those of you who've met me before, apologies if you've heard this before, but let me just tell you a little bit about me and my world as an entrepreneur and how I became a social entrepreneur. So I set my first business up at the age of 15. I was constantly in trouble at school, always behind the class, couldn't really keep up. My way of venting that was being the upstart in class, and as a result I was excluded 5 times. I set my first business up at 15, trading long gone mussels, lifting fruit and vegetables from market traders' vans and loading up their stalls in Leeds Market. And I did 2 hours a day during the summer holidays, and I would get paid in fruit and veg. Okay, because they couldn't pay me cash because I was too young, and that was the rules in those days, allegedly. So I traded my time for fruit and vegetables. I then bagged those fruit and vegetables up, walked down to the bottom of Leeds Market to the bus station, and sold each bag for £1 to all the old dears coming into the market that morning to get the best fruit and vegetables. And I was making about £90 a day. Okay, I then earned enough money to set up my second business, which was an American sportswear business, where I imported from the US 5 teams per US sport. So things like American football, hats and t-shirts, baseball hats and t-shirts, etc. And I did it mail order. This is obviously before the internet. So I did it mail order through special niche American sportswear magazines in the UK. I then partnered with somebody else who had a lot of money, and he set up a chain of shops which became Stateside American Sportswear, which eventually got bought out by Foot Locker. I then came to university. I came to BROOKES. Somehow, God knows how, I managed to get into university. And that was where things started to take a little bit of a change for me. I became less interested in being an entrepreneur and more interested in becoming a millionaire. And I left BROOKES. I came to the hotel school, and not having a clue what I wanted to do, I left BROOKES and went into investment banking. And what my bosses in the investment banking world saw in me was that entrepreneurial spirit and the ability to understand businesses and really get down to the bottom of, to the nuts and bolts of those businesses. So I became an operational lead, which basically, in post-recession speak, is I was the arsehole, excuse my language, but I'm a northerner. I was the arsehole that got sent to businesses to close them down, to make hundreds and hundreds of people redundant. That was me. But I was a millionaire, and I had a Porsche, and I hired a yacht every year, and I went on fantastic ski holidays, and I didn't want for anything. But I was an absolute pillock. Right? And then, early November 2008, I was in my Porsche, driving down the M1, having closed a business, a 3rd-generation family business in a small Yorkshire town. And I watched, with absolutely no emotion on my part, the current owner of that business break down in tears in his late 70s at the fact that he was no longer going to be able to support his workforce, who supported a further 80 people in that local community. And I didn't give a damn. And on the way down the M1, on the way back to London, I had a little bit of an epiphany moment. No, I had a breakdown. And it wasn't the Porsche, it was me. I had a guilt trip. I didn't understand why I did what I did, because I knew, actually, in my heart of hearts, that business could be saved. And I knew there was absolutely no reason why I should have closed that business down. The only reason why I did was because my bosses told me to do it, because they wanted their capital back. And I couldn't reverse that decision, and it's lived with me, it's haunted me every single day of my life since then. Okay, not just the fact that I did it once, but I did it time and time and time again. So I sat there in the services, Leicester Forest services, and I plotted what I wanted to do next. And what I wanted to do was set up a socially focused management consultancy business. A management consultancy that would restructure and turn around businesses, help small businesses through the recession, okay? And the last resort was always going to be redundancy. We would do our best never to make anybody redundant. We would always try and find an innovative, entrepreneurial way around to the solution. And what we were also going to do, in order to generate a unique selling point, because we're not Accenture, we're not PwC, the go-to companies for all this sort of stuff, we were going to do something slightly different, where we were going to help disadvantaged people in local communities set up their own businesses and become self-employed. And that's the social enterprise element of Advantage 42. So we make our money through corporate consultancy, working for multinationals in the UK, the US, and the Middle East. And we divert a huge proportion, up to 40% of our profits and 40% of our resource, into supporting at-risk groups for free. So the Entrepreneurial Skills Program is multifaceted in that we bring other entrepreneurs together, and we get groups of up to 20 people, mainly ex-offenders, so people who have done horrific things, rapists, murderers, paedophiles, you name it, people who are furthest away from society and integration into society, the people who are the highest risk to society post-release, but also the highest cost burden to society because of the nature of their conviction. And we help set them up in business, because in doing that, we actually, we believe, are able to focus their energies and focus their minds on rehabilitation a lot better. And there's a lot of studies out there that actually cater to that school of thought. Over the last 6 years, we've been responsible for over 750 people coming through our doors. 380 of those have gone on to set up their own self-employed businesses, and we've created over 1,500 jobs. Okay, and we have zero equity in any of those organizations. Absolutely nothing. We had a guy who, before I started doing this, I would have crossed the street to avoid him. He'd done 15 years for armed robbery. Whilst he was in jail, he ran a drug racket. He was the most frightening man I've ever met, and he set up a security business. Okay, and we helped him do it. Because his USP was, if I used to rob you, I can tell you how to stop people like me, so I'm going to do that. And I thought that was a fantastic entrepreneurial idea. It's taking somebody's core skills, which is in here. You are entrepreneurs. You have an idea, you have a skill. Okay, and it takes that skill and actually makes it, and we help people make it happen. Okay, so he then decided that he was going to go off and give people a second chance. So he didn't employ anybody full-time. He employed them all on 17-hour weeks. Okay, and he went off and did event security across the UK and closed protection. And he employed other ex-offenders and ex-military personnel. Okay, people in the military world who probably or were highly likely to be suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. And he employed, at its peak, before he sold out, he employed over 500 people that way, all from areas in Yorkshire, small mining villages, remote areas, not inner city areas, people who wouldn't stand a chance of getting a job because of where they lived and what they'd done. That's poacher turned gamekeeper, that's social entrepreneurship, and the fact that we were able to facilitate that is why we are a socially focused entrepreneurial company. We also then, in recent years, have started helping injured Royal Marines, hence the 42 in our name. We sponsor 42 Commando Royal Marine, and we work with injured Royal Marines who come back from Iraq and Afghanistan with serious trauma. People who have lost limbs, people who have lost, more than just their limbs. They come back and are broken men. And women, actually. And they need to start again. And nobody will employ them because they don't feel that they're employable, so they don't actually feel any value to society anymore or to a potential employer, and the employers see that and don't employ them. So we help them, rebuild their confidence using entrepreneurship as a way to do that, but B, those that really want to, we help them set up their own businesses. There's a funny story there was, you know, I always get nervous when I stand in front of people, okay? Because I found out at the age of 23 that I was dyslexic, and that's why I was excluded from school 5 times. That's why I was always behind the curve in class, because I couldn't read. I didn't understand what I was reading on the paper, and I still don't. You develop coping mechanisms, and my coping mechanism was business, setting things up, coming up with harebrained schemes and trying them out. And Roberto will tell you, I've known Roberto for years, and you know, he'll tell you how many lunches I've bored him to tears and plied him with wine, trying to hark on about some ideas that we've then gone out and tested, and they've either worked or they haven't. But I was stood in a room full of ex-Royal Marines who were on their way out of the service, and did a similar introduction to this, and asked if there were any questions. And this was obviously something that they did just to test people, but I then had all of them throw their arms and legs, take them off and throw them at me. So they threw their prosthetic limbs at me, at my feet, as basically a warning to me that there was nothing that I could say that could actually make their lives any better. You know, that this is how they felt. They wanted to rattle me. They wanted to really, really put us through the mill, because what tends to happen in these types of environments is people come in and say they're going to help you, and they deliver a speech, okay, or they deliver a workshop, and then they go. And they never come back. Okay, that's it, it's done. Right? People who attend our programs, we help them guaranteed for a minimum of 1 year. And the guys that we set up in business back in 2009 still call us on a regular basis to ask for advice, but mainly they call us to gloat. And that's brilliant. And that's what we're here for, to listen to them gloating. Okay? So I'll say this now. Roberto and Jeffrey have my email address. If after today you want to talk to me, or you've got a question, I'm conscious that I'm scooting off pretty sharpish after this, please feel free to email me. Okay? And apologies as well, I'm very jet lagged. I got off a plane this morning, went to the office and came straight here, so it's all a bit hazy, especially over there. So I'm here to talk to you about pitching. Okay, pitching, the most important thing about a pitch is you. Okay, because what are you pitching for? When you go to talk to somebody about your idea, what are you pitching to them for?
To sell.
To sell what?
Or to ask for investment. To
ask for investment. You're pitching to somebody because you want something from them. You either want their custom or you want their money. Yeah? The two aren't necessarily the same thing. If you're going to a group of investors and you're pitching your idea to them, okay, they're looking for certain things. Okay, and you can provide them with as many financial spreadsheets and as robust a business plan with all the market research behind it as you possibly can. But if you've got zero personality and they don't buy you, you will not get anything from them. Okay, and that is the thing about entrepreneurs. Do you think that the world buys Virgin, or do they buy Richard Branson? They buy Branson. The challenge for Virgin is when Branson decides to properly take a step back, what happens then? Okay? Do people buy Amstrad, or do they buy Alan Sugar? They buy Alan Sugar. Yeah? That's the thing. As entrepreneurs, as idea leads, they're buying you, because not only are they buying the idea from you, but they're buying the commitment to see it through to the end. They're buying your knowledge and your passion, because trust me, the hardest thing, has anybody in this room set up their own business before? Okay, you'll agree then that the hardest thing you've ever done is setting up your own business. setting up a business?
Yeah, I'm sure it is. It's very hard.
Yeah, and it's very lonely, because sometimes you're the only one that can actually make it happen. You're the only, and if you decide one morning to wake up and say, you know what, forget it, it's over, then that's it. Nobody else is going to come in and do it for you. Because the first stages of setting up a business, you're on your own. Okay, so if I was going to give you, any of you, some of my money, I would want to know that every morning you got out of bed because you absolutely believed in what you were doing. So the first thing about pitching is P. P for passion. Okay? That is the most important thing for me as an investor that I want to see in somebody. Because if somebody's passionate, they're not going to give up. They're constantly going to look for solutions to problems. Okay? And they're never going to be afraid to ask for help because they're passionate about the end goal of their business. And they will do almost anything they can to realize that opportunity. So passion is key. The next thing that you need to be telling somebody, a panel of investors, okay, is you need to give them an insight. Okay, you need to give them an insight into your idea, into your business. Why are you doing what you're doing? Okay, I openly admit that for, you know, a fairly long time in my professional career, I was an idiot. I was the guy that was spat at dinner parties. I wasn't literally spat at dinner parties when I was in investment banking, but I tell you what though, when I set up Advantage 42 and started working with offenders, I was asked to leave dinner parties. Because I was helping people that society don't really want to know about. It's very easy to set up a business and help cuddly pandas or, you know, with all due respect, you know, people with illnesses. It's very easy to do that because people resonate with that. But you try and turn around and say to somebody, I help the very person that pretty much every bone in your body detests. Working with somebody who you know has raped a child. Yeah? But if I don't do it, or my company don't do it, who will? Do you believe in the ability to give somebody a second chance, irrespective of what they've done? And a lot of people don't deserve it. But as a society, if we're going to have an inclusive society and believe in the freedoms and the rights that as a society we promote, doesn't that extend to every level of society? Even the far distant corners where people, you know, who do things that we don't like exist and live. And isn't it our responsibility to help them come back into society in a way that is controlled? If they're turning up for work every day and they're doing a job, as long as it doesn't pose a risk to the people that they're restricted from seeing, surely that's a good thing, because they're not costing you as a taxpayer any money anymore. I don't know. You know, 90% of people that I talk to about that disagree with me. But then we'll just lock them up and throw away the key, because to lock these people up will cost us about £130,000 each a year, minimum. And you think about all the people in the community who have done this sort of crimes, well over 2 million people in our community who have some form of license and are living in the community, and you won't even know about it. So you want to lock 2 million people up at £130,000 a year minimum? When David Cameron does his next autumn statement and he increases the budget, or increases your taxes, sorry, to pay for that, what will you say then? Would you rather have a social entrepreneur who's trying to make a difference, me, one of 1,000 others trying to make a difference, or would you rather pay higher taxes and lock them all up and throw away the key? Again, 90% of people would rather lock them up and throw away the key. So, give somebody an insight. They don't necessarily have to agree with it, but they have to understand why you're doing what you're doing. The T of pitching is the technical side of things. Okay, what is it that you're doing? How are you going to do it? Is it an internet-based thing? Is it an app? You know, what's it going to involve? Is it a workshop? Is it a product? Is it free coffee? Is it free sandwiches? Is it a business in a box idea? Does it exist in the UK? Is it something that you're going to run in Africa? How are you going to make your business sustainable? The technical sides of the business. What does that involve? The next thing is capital. Capital requirements, capital investment. It's the C of pitching. What do you need from them? Yeah, and why do you need it? Well, you've already told them why you need it because you've given them the insight. And then you get to H. How? How are you going to run the business? Okay, and how, crucially, how are you going to sustain it? Because if I give you 5 grand to set up your business, you need 10 and I give you 50%. Okay, bearing in mind you're setting up a social business, so realistically, I've got to write that 5 grand off. Right? So how are you then going to make sure that you don't have to keep coming back and pitching for money every 3 months, every 6 months, every year? How are you going to sustain your business? Another thing that I would say, this is obviously a social entrepreneurial program. Understand, before you go into any pitch environment, what a social enterprise is. Okay, and because there are 65,000 social enterprises in the UK, I think, according to Voice, which is the Social Enterprise Coalition. And we got on the wrong side of the Cabinet Office about 2 years ago because we did a little impromptu study and found out that of those 65,000 social enterprises, less than 2,000 were genuine social enterprises. Okay, they were social enterprises by name, not social enterprises by nature. A social enterprise has its own independent revenue generating source. So it sells something for hard cash. And the trade-off for that is that you buying my product know that I serve my social purpose. I help people set up their own businesses from groups that really nobody really wants anything to do with. Okay, and it's a real challenge. But what that means is that whether I help 1 person a year or 100 people a year, I can sustain that help. Whereas if I'm reliant every year on some form of grant funding, charitable donations, philanthropic donations, you name it, right, then I can only plan really for the year ahead of me. And there's no sustainability in that. Because if you've got to think about the consequences of what you're doing, not the change that it's making today, but what will happen in the future if what you do stops. Yeah, if you set up a soup kitchen in the centre of Oxford and you feed 100 people a night, okay, and the way you do that is a simple 1-for-1 movement thing, because you sell soup at lunchtimes to businesses for £2 a pot, okay, and then every pot that you sell commercially, you're giving a pot away to a homeless person that night. Perfect social enterprise model. So simple. Tom's Shoes do it. You know, there's those I can't remember their name. Is it the Bandy brothers who do their parents were killed in the tsunami and they set up a flip-flop company recently? You know, that's a perfect one. The 1-for-1 movement is a perfect, simple example of a social enterprise. But if you stop taking your soup, if you're supposed to be at Carfax Tower every evening at 10:30 to feed people soup, and you've got 100 people relying on you, and you stop doing it, who else is going to feed those 100 people? So setting up a social business isn't just about the ideology of helping people, it's the responsibility that comes with that of sustaining it. Okay, and not only sustaining it, but growing it. Because if you've got a good idea, why can't it be replicated in every other city in the country, or every other country in the world? Yeah, so you've got to be really flexible with your ownership and how you're going to do it. Do you own a social enterprise, or are you just the custodian? You know, these are all things that you need to think about, because that's what the investors are going to want to know. If I walk out of here and get knocked over by a bus tonight, will my business continue tomorrow? Will the people who I've committed to helping for the next 11 months following the Entrepreneurial Skills Program we ran at the beginning of November, will they still be able to get help if I'm not here? You're damn right they will. Because we made a commitment. Okay, and that's what your investors and anybody who's going to be buying your product are going to want to know. You have to give them a reason to believe. You give them an insight into your business. You tell them the benefit of your business, and you give them a reason to believe why it's your business that they should be investing in, and why it's your product that they should be buying. That's it. That's pitching. It's standing in front of a group and being able to be passionate and knowledgeable about what you do. And keep it really, really simple. That's how you pitch, in my view. You know, the buzzword at the moment is social enterprise. So the number of pitches that I've been to where, you know, I've had to take my checkbook, or I've had to go and sit with Roberto every Christmas and do the entrepreneurship Dragon's Den, you know, and people sell me a really shaky business idea, and they go, but by the way, it's a social enterprise, so buy it, invest in it, it's brilliant. Come on, it helps people. Yeah, feel good about yourself. You know, then that for me is a trend. You're buying into a trend of social enterprise. If your business is a genuine social enterprise, or you want it to be one, it has to be underpinned by sound commercial viability. So irrespective of what your social purpose is, your core business needs to be able to exist. So if you're selling soup for £2 a pot at lunchtime, and your social objective is to feed homeless people in the evening, you still need to be able to sell soup at lunchtime. And if that business model doesn't stack up, your social enterprise, your ability to help people, will be on very, very shaky ground right from the very beginning. Okay, so weave your social purpose into your business model, into your pitch. Okay, it's giving people the insight into that business, into why you're, not only what it is, but why you're doing what you're doing. Okay, so I'm doing it to make money. Advantage 42 needs to make shitloads of cash every year. Again, excuse my language, I'm a northerner. It needs to make as much money as we can, because the more money we make, the more people we can help. Simple as that. Profit is brilliant. Brilliant. Because it gives us more to divert. Gives us a much better resource to be able to help the people that need helping, and help them in a way that they need helping. So we can reform our business, we can change how we help them. So if they don't want workshops anymore, they want one-to-ones, we've got the money to be able to pay our associates, our consultants, for their time to do it. Yeah, if that's what they want, so we can adapt to the market, and that's why we need to make as much money as possible. For me, you know, there are, like I said, there are 65,000 definitions in my view of what a social enterprise is. As long as, for me, the simple explanation is, as long as your business makes money and is self-sustaining, and in being self-sustaining can fund your social objective, then it is a social enterprise.
But just to come in there, I don't think it could be ethically unsound. For example, you couldn't necessarily run a social enterprise that was based on, shall we say, exploiting kids in Bangladesh to make clothing.
Yeah. Cheap
clothing. And then say, oh, but I'm going to do charitable work back in the UK.
Yeah.
There is an ethical element which underlies all social enterprises.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah. Hopefully the fact that you're in the room means that you won't go and use sweatshop labour or anything like that. But yeah, absolutely, that's a good point, Jeff. That you know, it is about, you will have a certain set of guiding principles, and those guiding principles are yours, because you're the entrepreneur, you're the vision, you're the drive behind your business. So if you disagree with something, and you don't want something to happen, whether it be using kids in Bangladesh or, you know, paying people under the minimum wage or anything like that, then that's fine. That's a pillar for you to stand behind and to base your business on. Okay, again, find a way of weaving that in to your business plan, yeah, or to your pitch. Go ahead.
What do you sell and who to?
What do I sell? I sell my advice, consultancy. We help businesses grow. You know, we design solutions that essentially take a company from the brink of collapse back into profitability and into growth. Okay, so exactly the same thing that I used to do in the previous life, prior to pre-Advantage 42, is what we do now. But we just do it in a much more ethical, much more responsible way.
Are you the only founder of this enterprise?
Yeah.
Or co-founder?
No, I'm the only founder.
I'm asking because I spoke to a number of investors, and they prefer to invest in a team and then say exactly what you said. Founding an enterprise, it's a very lonely business, and it's much better to have two people. If one person is getting run over the bus, what happens?
I can understand why people might think that. Personally, for me, if your idea is better with two people, then it's two people. If it's you, don't go out and find a partner just for the sake of finding a partner. It's your idea.
There is, particularly at startup stage, particularly if you're looking at getting some grant funding. So obviously, eventually you want to be much more reliant on trading, but a lot of social enterprises, including the ones that don't fit the 2,000 and the other 63,000, have a mix of trading and grants. Probably many of those have too many grants and too many trading. Okay, but there's nothing wrong with a social enterprise that has, let's say, 75% of turnover trading and 25% of ongoing grants. Now, be mindful that if you're going for grants, most of the granting bodies will want to see at a minimum of 2 directors in the company. They will not give you grants if there's only 1 director. And the other director of the company should not be your wife, cousin,
dog. Yeah, and that could be a reason why you're pitching. You know, we get asked as an organisation, as individuals, we get asked to be non-executive directors of people's companies quite regularly. You know, and that's not just a simple, you know, whilst it would be nice to say yes to everybody, you know, we have obligations elsewhere. So again, that's why it's important to have a good pitch, because you're going to have to pitch to those non-exec directors as well. Okay, so you might not want your capital from me in February when you guys are pitching your ideas, if you are pitching your ideas in February, you know.
March the 4th is
okay,
the day.
You know, if I bring my checkbook, you know, then am I going to be giving you money, or am I going to give you my time and experience? What's more valuable to you? And, you know, so you still need to have, but the pitch is the same. Yeah? So if you need another director, that's fine, but the idea is still yours. You're not giving them ownership.
Has anybody ever heard of...
You're getting them on board for their guidance and for their experience. And crucially, actually, you know, don't go and get your mum or your brother or your sister or someone to do it, or your best mate down the pub because they buy you beer and chew the fat with you. Go and get somebody to be a director who has influence, who has a network that you can tap into, and will take you round and open doors for you in the right places. That's the true value of another director, and that's what a lot of the funding agencies are looking for, is how you're going to network and exert influence and reduce your reliance on that funding. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks.
So you've got to be able to talk about your idea in a really short space of time. Okay, the elevator pitch is a classic kind of analogy, and you know, people undervalue it. Not only undervalue its importance, but people think, oh well, if I'm in the lift with somebody and I've got their attention within 60 seconds, they're going to give me 5 minutes. They're not. You know, they might like your idea, but if you haven't sold it to them within that 60 seconds, or that, you know, literally 60 seconds, then you know, as soon as they walk out of the lift, invariably they're going to have forgotten about you. So you need to really grab them. There needs to be something about your pitch, something, maybe a statement, maybe an opening gambit, you know, whatever it is. You know, I've tried all sorts of, like, do you fancy coming down to Wandsworth Prison and working with rapists and murderers? You know, I've tried that, didn't work. You know, genuinely didn't. You know, but I'm just trying to grab people's attention. What? You know, it's better than saying, excuse me, Mr. Sugar, can I have 5 minutes of your time, please? You know. So think about how you're going to pitch. The other thing that I would also recommend that you do is really research who else does what you do. Okay, and if no one else does it, what's the first thing you're going to ask yourself?
Why?
Why? Right? And do you really think that the reason why no one else does it is because you're the only one to have thought about it?
Probably not.
Right, so there's going to be a reason for it. Somebody else hasn't done it for a reason. They've probably done a little bit more research. So, and Google is a fantastic thing. With the internet, it's a fantastic thing. You can find it. You can, use that search engine to really find out why it hasn't been done or if it's been done. So not only can you look for success stories and get ideas and support that way, but you can also find out why it hasn't worked in the past. Because what you will invariably find, if you're going to a social investment pitching situation, they get bombarded with ideas. There are very, very few social investment organizations out there, and they have a very, very limited supply of capital. Okay, so they're becoming more and more selective with who they give their money to. And what they're interested in, yes, is the sustainability, but what they also want to know is that, yeah, you're passionate, but you're not blindly passionate. You're aware of what's going on. Your insight is absolutely nailed on. Okay? You understand that it hasn't worked in the past, and you understand the reason why it hasn't worked in the past, but the reason why your idea will work is because you've addressed this issue, and this issue. Okay? And have you noticed something else about what I'm talking to you about today in relation to, or in comparison to, any other seminar, lecture, talk you've ever been to? No PowerPoint. Yeah. It is the death of any pitches, in my view, PowerPoint. If you're going to do something and you want to be innovative and you need to show somebody something, get yourself down, well, it used to be over there, but they've knocked it down now, the print shop, and mount it on storyboards. Design them properly, not on PowerPoint. Don't mount PowerPoint on storyboards. Go and do a proper PDF design, find an illustrator, find somebody who can do it for you, put your storyboards together, and come in with a slide deck. Okay, when we pitch for Advantage 42, and we go into X hedge fund or X multinational, and we walk in there, and we walk in with an easel and a bloody great big black box of storyboards, everybody sits up and pays notice, because they know that for the next 5 minutes or hour, they're not going to suffer death by PowerPoint. Yeah, that they're going to have personality, that they're going to see something different, because we do things differently at Advantage 42. We see businesses differently. We design solutions in a completely different way. We have a different way of looking at products. We make our clients think again. Okay? So if we're this solution design business, but we come out and we lean on PowerPoint, or a really cumbersome document that we give to people in advance, please read this before the meeting, like hell. Yeah? 1 page. If you're going to leave something behind, 1 page. Big writing, finger spaces between the words. Right? Something that they can digest in the 30 seconds it takes them to get from the door of the room back to their desk or back to the lift. Really, really simple. Bullet point format. Dress it up. Colour. Yeah? Be creative in how you put it forward. Yeah? Be creative in that. Don't just give somebody something that is just going to get shoved on their desk and forgotten about. A great idea that one of our other associates has, he's got a search lab. So they design, so have you ever heard of Zoopla? Right, so they are responsible for the new Zoopla. Okay, that will be hitting the streets probably in January or February. Okay, or the search engines in January and February. And his leave behind, he's got his little 1-page leave behind, but it's a paper aeroplane. He just gives people paper airplanes at the end of the meeting. It's a bit odd, but on the paper airplane it says "Open me." Right? It's a bit pointless because the majority of people will just, leave it. But it's brilliant. It's a brilliant idea because it's printed on card, a properly folded card in a paper airplane. So they'll leave it on their desk. People will come in and they go, "Oh, open me," and they open it. GeoSearch Labs. 5 points as to why GeoSearch Labs is the future tool, is the solution to all of your search engine problems. It's brilliant. It's a gimmick, but it's better than a piece of paper that's going to get chucked in the shredder at the end of the day. Am I boring you?
No.
Is there anything else? I mean, you know, I'm conscious that, you know, obviously people have set up their own businesses before. Does anybody want to tell me about their business?
Can I ask, do you ever take props with you other than storyboards, like people or anything that maybe might be a bit more provocative?
Yeah, I mean,
Or is there danger there? I mean, I can appreciate if you brought a limbless marine in, it might be...
I've done that before.
Too...
I've done that before. I've taken in the guy who set up the security business. I've taken him to a few meetings with government before. That was quite interesting. You know, it works. It does work, but it can also backfire. So make sure that you do it in a controlled way. You know, the other thing as well is you're going to take your product along with you. If it's soup, make sure it tastes damn good and make sure it's hot. You know, if it's a product or a technology, make sure it works. Yeah, so the use of props is a great thing. If you've got a working example of your product, it's brilliant. But how many people have ever watched Dragon's Den on the telly? Right, and they've brought their product to the Dragons, okay, and it's not worked properly, or it's not quite finished. You know, and you kind of like sit there and go, God, I just wouldn't do it. Would you hand in an essay for your module or whatever if it wasn't finished?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, that's bad. That may be a bad example then, right? But you know, you know. So yeah, I've used props before. You know, do I use them all the time? No. Do my colleagues? I don't know. Probably. They don't, but they don't. Probably the same as me. They probably don't use them all the time. I guess it depends on the meeting. I use it with government to make the point. There's nothing better than sitting outside Ken Clark's office when he was Justice Secretary with a guy that served 15 years for armed robbery. That's brilliant. The fact that he was allowed in the Ministry of Justice was a feat of, that was quite interesting. But yeah, you know, you kind of make the point that, you know, here is the living, breathing example of why we do what we do. A guy that's dressed in a really nice suit, you know, fine, he's got a face like he's been in the ring with Mike Tyson for half his life, because he's literally, you know, been through the mill. And he's got a really gruff voice, and he's a bit rough around the edges, but he's got a heart of gold, and we should listen to what he has to say. You know, and that's why he's here. And it's amazing how people's perceptions change. Okay, and you know, you talk to people that I mentioned earlier that I've been asked to leave a lot of dinner parties, and one of the reasons why I was asked to leave one, or the last one I went to, was I didn't bring anybody with me, but I sat there and said, you know, the majority of paedophiles that I've ever come across are people like you and me. And there was silence just like that, and people put their knives and forks down very, very calmly and asked me to leave. How dare I call them a paedophile? I wasn't calling them a paedophile, I was just making the point that the majority of paedophiles are invariably upstanding members of the community. Now think back to this. Now that was in 2010, and what's happened over the last, anybody heard of Operation U-Tree? Pillars of society, people who should be trusted. Had one recently this week, cancer specialist, a children's cancer specialist. You know, let's not be blinkered to what's right in front of us. It could be sat next to you on the bus and you would not know a thing about it, because the only way you'll ever know is if they're caught. Politicians, chiefs of police, people in the military, doctors, teachers, celebrities. You know, that's why I do what I do. Because the people who are going to be at a risk to my children, okay, are the people that I work with every day, professionals, people who are seen as upstanding members of the community. I've never ever worked with a paedophile or a paedophile, I was going to say rapist, but that's not true, a paedophile who is lives on a council estate, okay, and doesn't have a job and is also a serial criminal. Never met one. But I've met plenty of lawyers and accountants, and doctors and dentists. So before you take a prop in, think about that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
In a long-winded way. Go ahead.
How do you gauge, because obviously in social enterprise you've got the money-making aspect and then the social element. How do you gauge before going into pitch which one you should potentially plug more to your audience?
That's a good question. Opinions on that I guess will differ. For me, as an investor, I look at it from the perspective of I want to make sure if I'm giving you 5 grand, 50 grand, I only want to give it to you once, and I want you to be here in 5 years' time. Okay, so my driver is, yes, I'm buying the social output, but actually what I'm really interested in is the sustainability of your business model that is going to keep your social enterprise and your social objective not only in existence, but actually is going to grow it. So we started off at Advantage 42 with, with 0 clients, and this commitment that we'd made ourselves to work with 50 people in the first year. And had no idea how we were going to do it. Absolutely none. And actually we ended up helping 50 people in the last 3 months of that year, because it took us 6 months to turn our first bean. Yeah, and then we were like, the next year we were like, right, we want to double it, we want to go to 100. Right, and we did about 100, I think it was about 117, 118, and then the next year we wanted to double that. Okay, and that was just totally unsustainable. So now we've learned, actually, we're at a point where we do a minimum every year of 150 people. Okay, and any more than that is great. But we've kind of reached our critical mass from that perspective, because realistically, not everybody that walks in the door is an entrepreneur, and not everybody who walks in the door has got an idea that is actually going to have legs and sustain them in employment. So we've got to be realistic about that as well. So I would say it's all about the business. It's about because your business is going to sustain your social objective. Okay, and the conversation we had earlier about what it costs to run a business and where the money goes is kind of think about it in that perspective as well. Any more questions?
So how did you land your first client?
Pure bloody luck. No, I don't leave people alone, basically. So the way, yeah, so how did I land my first client? I pestered the living daylights out of her, because I knew that that her business needed our help. And I knew that she couldn't afford what she wanted, which was Accenture to come in on their white horse and charge her, £3,000 a day for the privilege of looking at her business and telling her how to fix it, but not actually fixing it for her. Okay, so I set about it in that way. I kept on sending solutions, I kept on sending ideas, totally free. I was like, here, think about this, implement that, tell me whether it works. I'll call you in a month and tell me if it works. Call her in a month, and eventually she started taking my calls, and then eventually I got a contract. And since then, we design solutions before we even go into clients. So we spot an opportunity in the market for them, or a way that they could be doing something better, and then we network our way into that company, to the person that we need to speak to. Invariably it's the managing director or the chief exec, and we sell down. But there's very few social enterprise management consultancies out there. We're kind of a bit unique in that front, and it's a huge challenge. It's just something that we wrestle with every year, because frankly, if your business is in trouble, you don't give a damn whether I'm going to be going off and helping someone else for free. You want your business fixing because you've got kids to feed and a mortgage to pay and lights to keep switched on, people that you employ to keep in employment. And the fact, if I turn around to you and said I help ex-offenders, you'd be kind of like, what, I'll wait for Accenture, I'll take my chances. So we've kind of in a way sort of really picked a a social purpose that has been quite difficult. You know, so how we sell what we do socially is an area of constant challenge for us. Because frankly, you know, how many of you think it's a really good thing that we're helping people that rape children or murder people, or, you know, it's the sort of thing that as a society it turns our stomachs. It turns mine. You know, some of them are quite, they've been through jail, they've been in jail for a long time, and they feel the need to tell you everything, and I don't want to know. I don't care what you've, obviously I care what you've done. What I care about is that you don't do it again. Yeah, and that's why I do what I do. So I'm not interested how many banks you robbed, or how many cars you stole, or, you know, whatever. I'm genuinely, I don't care, because you've served your penalty, you've served your sentence. Somebody somewhere who is far greater at making these decisions, far better, sorry, at making these decisions than I am, have decided that that it's time for you to be released into society. What they do, though, is they open the prison door and kick them out with 50 quid in their back pocket and the off chance that they might get into a hostel. Yeah, so, you know, there are services out there. The offending community, you know, the rehabilitation community around offending is actually pretty good. Okay, but it's overwhelmed because it suffers from chronic lack of investment. So I could do if I did what I did, what our social enterprise did, and we did it 100% funded by the government, it would have lasted, well, it wouldn't have actually got off the ground. So, you know, and the fact that our USP on that front is that everybody who works for Advantage 42, every single person is an entrepreneur. We've all run our own businesses, or we all run our own businesses. You know, I tell you what, talk about your failures. Never be afraid to talk about failure. You know, because I tell you what, I've failed countless times. The idea is that, you know, seriously, buy Roberto a pint in the Union one afternoon and he'll tell you some stupid stories about some of the harebrained ideas that I've talked to him about in the past, right? Gone off and tried, spent time and money on doing that, and he's turned around and said, that won't work. And I'm like, yeah, well, it'll be fine. Be fine, don't worry, we know how to make it happen. Okay, and then it hasn't worked. So, and then he says to me quite smugly, so what happened to that thing? Oh, yeah. Won't make that mistake again. You know, but that's what investors want to hear. If you go in there saying, I'm the best thing since sliced bread and I'd never failed and everything I've touched turns to gold, I'm going to go, yeah, right, whatever. Next. Come on, move over.
You said you sometimes got to the point where you could make a pitch for somebody as a client before you'd had the sort of out-and-out discussion, or before they'd invited you to do that.
Yeah.
Now, what approach do you take to getting the information, though? Because that must be the key thing. You want to know, you know, what sort of business they think they're in, what the figures are, how well they're doing, how well they're not doing.
Yeah.
And that's quite difficult because, you know, official sources for that sort of data can be 18 months late.
Yeah, so, of course it can, yeah. If you're relying on companies' house data anyway, it can be, yeah, absolutely.
So, you know, do you have an approach that's unique to you about how you get into that data?
No. No, is the honest answer. You know, a lot of it it starts with a hunch. Yeah. Yeah. Or sometimes it starts with an experience. You know, I've had a really bad customer experience with Sky or whoever. Yeah. You know, and what, you know, that is just so. When I've looked at that and thought about that and investigated that experience, you know, it happens more. It happens to other people as well as me, because obviously the internet also brings with it blogs. Yeah. So you can find out that is something that is historic, and then you can track those blogs, or then you go on Twitter and you find out, you just search on Twitter anything around that brand, and those negative, and you can see what the company is saying, and then you can actually say, well, actually, you know, in 2012, Mars said this about the fact that their Mars bars have got peanuts in them, or something, you know, and Mars are constantly saying that they fixed the problem, and you know full well that they haven't. So actually the solution to this is clearly there's something wrong with your production line, or do you see what I mean? Or, so and then we go to them, and a lot of it's just a hook, you know, and we chuck a load of bait into the sea essentially, and you know, we get a conversion rate of about 8 to 10%.
So every time you've got a really credible line, as it were, you get a better hearing.
Yeah.
And better access to them. Yeah. I mean, that's persistence, really.
It is. No, it is. It is.
It's really persistent, which I think is central to...
Key thing for entrepreneur, social or non-social.
Yeah.
Persistence.
It's a numbers game.
Persistence.
I think it's resilience.
It's a numbers game. You know,
passion and persistence. If you don't have passion, you never have a persistence.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
what the guy said at that one of those first meetings was that you have to be an unreasonable person. I love that because it's just so sharp, and that's the absolute fix. You know, you don't need anything else. Just be unreasonable and keep on at it.
Yeah, you've got to be. You know, there's an element of being sheer bloody minded to it. Yeah. But I think also, you know, the most important thing that I've learned about setting up a business or being an entrepreneur is knowing when to give up.
Yeah.
Okay. It's knowing when to actually sit there and say, you know what, I am really passionate about this, but I just cannot, I can't do, I don't have the ability to do it, and I can't find anybody with the ability to do it. So you know what, it's either before its time, or it's past its time, or it's just not got any value really, and it's just my passion that's driving this, and there's no credibility behind the numbers or behind it. So actually, you know what, put it to bed. There are 6 questions that you can use essentially that we've developed with our entrepreneurial program to test the validity of your idea. You know, it's who else does it? Why should you spend your time doing it? Okay, what does your product do? Okay, what problem will it solve? Now that's a problem, not necessarily a social problem, but why do Coke make drinks? Because it solves the problem of thirst, quenches thirst, right? Okay. Okay, who else does what I do? If nobody else does it, why don't they do it? What is the information in the marketplace that I have? And the 6th question is the same as the second. Why should I spend my time doing this? Okay, now you can go with a lot of ideas, you can sit there and go through that in an hour. Okay, but if you can answer each one of those questions succinctly and knowledgeably, then that's time then to go off and look at the next stage of your business generation, which is, you know, doing some proper market research, gathering some proper market intelligence, you know, and then maybe starting to put the bones together of a business plan. But a lot of the time, people have an idea because there's a lack of something, you know. So you know, there's a lack of, you know, when I was at Brooks, it was a little bit, Oxford was a little bit, not dodgy, that's not the right word, but it wasn't a particularly safe place to be around here at night. You know, especially, what's that road over between Pullens Lane, and the little alleyway, or the path that used to go down the side of it, and all that. You know, if you wanted to go over to Morell Hall and stuff like that, it wasn't a particularly safe place to be for guys and girls. Guys used to get mugged and have the living daylights beaten out of them by the locals, and the girls used to, yeah. But you know, so there was so there was a problem there, and from that came the night bus. That the university started using all their sports centre minibuses at night, and they recruited people for free. They just got they fed them at the sports centre, and they then just, you knew there was night buses stops at Gypsy Lane, at Wheatley, and it went to all the halls of residence, and then a number of stops down Cowley Road, Abingdon Road as well, and you knew that the night bus was going to be at a certain place at a certain time, and it was a student-led initiative, you know, that was supported by the university, but it solved a problem of stopping people from getting mugged and beaten up, and worse still, walking down Pullens Lane or walking home at night. People could travel in safety if they wanted to, and it gave people the option. You know, I don't think that's still the same. I think now that, because at the time Brooks didn't own all the things that they own around here. You know, I mean, we had porter cabins here, I think. So it's meeting that need. So sometimes with some products, if there is a genuine need for something, getting people from A to B, and it doesn't exist, and actually there's a credible reason to have that, then that's the in. And if you're going to investors for that, tell them the benefit of having that. You tell them the gap in the market and the benefit for plugging that gap, and how it could affect them in a positive way if they don't have it. So if you can design the solution before you go in, then you're going to get the right people in front of you when you're pitching. So you've already got your friends. People don't like saying no. People find it very, very difficult. There's tons of sort of psychology information out there. People feel really quite uncomfortable with saying no. A lot of people, I say no, I need to qualify that. People don't like saying no when somebody asks them for help. Okay? People love saying no, generally, but when you're specifically asking for help from somebody, whether it be money or, just time that they're asking from you, you feel quite, you say no, and there's just, there's something that happens emotionally in you. When you pass somebody on the street and they've got a cup out and they're asking for money and it's freezing cold and all they really want is a hot drink, and you say no, I always feel a little bit guilty about that, but crikey, I'd be on the street myself if I gave every single person that asked me for, 50p for a cup of tea, if I gave everybody that 50p. So make sure that you've got the solution. Then people will find it very, very difficult to say no. And it doesn't matter how much money you want to raise, whether you want to raise, £2,000 or £200 million. And if the solution fits and the business numbers behind it stack up and there's a community benefit and there's a social benefit, then you will find the money. And what tends to happen with the wealthier philanthropists out there, if one of them gives, another one will give. It sets off this kind of chain reaction. The hardest thing you'll ever do is getting the first customer, the first investor. Once you've done that, you can then reference the fact, and just before you reference the fact that Sam Wood gave you some money, just make sure that the person that you're asking for money from actually respects me and doesn't think that I'm an idiot. And there are plenty of people who think that I'm an idiot. But just so again, do your homework on that.
You mentioned about pitching and keeping things brief and simple. What advice would you give with regard to, obviously people are going to be pitching for a sum of money, the detail of what specifically you want the money for? How much detail do you think you need to go into with regard to that? I mean, it's quite a sort of difficult balance, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
And whether it represents good value for money.
Yeah, okay, that's an interesting question. I think the first thing that I would say there is it depends on how much you're asking for. So how much you actually need, what the total amount of capital is, and how much you're actually asking for from that particular investor or each of the investors that are stood in front of you. Personally, I think that that you shouldn't go out and talk about an idea until you've actually run the numbers. Now, I know it might not necessarily be part and parcel of this program. But Excel is a relatively simple tool to use, because you can add up and take away and do all the funky calculations that you need to do, right? But just sit there and do your first year costs, and you'll be amazed. You'll start off with 3 or 4 lines in your cost of sales, okay? And by the time you have it open on your laptop or minimized in the bottom of your screen or whatever, and come back to it and visit it, and you'll find that that line grows and grows and grows. So when you sit there and think that actually setting up my business is going to cost 5 grand in the first year, I can bet you that you haven't thought about how much it's going to cost you for print paper, how much it's going to cost you for your travel to and from pitch meetings, how much it's going to cost you to get a decent suit and a pair of shoes. The fact that you're not going to get paid, so how are you going to cover your expenses? Because the majority of deals are done over a beer or a coffee. Okay, and you buy. You want to take me out for my advice? You're buying. Yeah? You won't have thought about things like, you know, if I need a mobile phone, or I need a, you know, internet connection, Wi-Fi connection, you know, all this sort of stuff adds up, and we take it for granted because we assume that, you know, we've always had it, but actually it becomes a business expense, and you think that you think that you use your mobile a lot now. Personally, wait until you're doing business. Yeah, my mobile bill every month, 300–400 quid, easily. Is it worth it? Every single penny. Every penny. You know, I only wish there was a social enterprise mobile company out there, because I'm fed up of giving it to Vodafone. Right?
Actually, in Oxford, isn't it? There's a mobile phone.
Phone co-op.
Yeah, the phone co-op.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, you know, I think the numbers are actually quite important, and somebody will ask you something. They'll say to you, so how much is that going to cost? So I'm going to give you £5,000. Okay, what are you going to use that money for? And if you can turn around and say, well, you know, roughly 10% is going to be used in that, 20% is going to be used in this, you know, and then, you know, 500 quid is going to be used for this, you know, and all of a sudden I'm sat there and I'm getting confidence in you because you know exactly what you're going to do with the money. I'm not just pouring it into a bottomless pit. And it also actually allows you to test the validity of your idea if you've done the numbers before you actually go out and pitch, because, you know, you're sitting in front of people who have worked bloody hard for their money. You know, and as much as people want to help, they don't want to pour it down the drain, because frankly, if I'm going to give somebody some of my money, right, I'm giving it to you instead of putting it in my own company or in my own initiative. Yeah, so I want to make damn sure that it's not going to be wasted. Don't link wastage with failure, right? Because a huge proportion of businesses, depends on which statistic you read, but a huge proportion of businesses don't make it past their first year. But actually, most businesses fail in year 3. Why is that? Is that because when you do the numbers, you only think about year 1 and year 2? And you kind of like think that momentum's going to have taken hold in year 3? Yeah, well, our revenues are going to go up in year 3, so that's great, we're making more profit. But what nobody actually figures out is that in order to deliver those revenues, you've got to have a higher cost of sales, you've got to have more people, you've got to have more product. You factored in, you know, inflation. And we had one business, you know, multinational US company, unbelievable, set up a business in the Middle East, okay, and didn't factor in staff. What? You're a Fortune 500 company and you didn't factor in staff? Are you kidding me? Well, we've got the team. We've got the, you know, the central international sales team based in, you know, sunny Colorado or snowy Colorado. You know, we don't need, you know, staff on the ground, the concept. You know, Muggins here had to spend 3 months in Saudi Arabia at the beginning of last year fixing that, finding people locally who could do that job because they hadn't budgeted for it and they couldn't find the money that they needed to get the right people. You know, and that's a multinational company. In year 3 of its development program for that project, people just don't think about it. So, you know, I think numbers are hugely important.
And before you panic, we do have a session on numbers, yeah? Coming up.
Yeah, but don't, you know, seriously, yeah, don't, you know, I'm the world's worst at accounting and maths and anything like that. Numbers, people look at numbers, I see, you know, gibberish. It just, but you know, there are certain things that I look at. If somebody gives me a spreadsheet of numbers, I'm looking for certain key drivers and certain themes. Okay, you know, things that are happening or not happening, or that number, you know, that just looks a little bit low. You know, can you qualify that number? You know, and that is the sort of thing that invariably, if you go out and find an investor, when people say no, they're going to say why. And if you can then go away and take that advice from them, and they might turn around and say, I don't think that your idea is viable because you've not properly considered the cost of running this business, right? Great. And you've got a detailed financial Excel spreadsheet. That's all it needs to be at this stage, yeah? Then you can go away and you can say, right, they don't think that my costs are right. Right, what have I underestimated here? Okay, great. If I know you're not going to invest in my business, but I'm going to go in and look at this. Can I buy you a coffee and come back and test the numbers with you again? I'd really appreciate your advice. Going back to what I said 10 minutes ago, it's very difficult for people to say no when you ask them for help. They've given you some feedback, and you've committed to looking into that and trying to remedy it, and you've asked them for their help to qualify that what you've done is the right thing. It's half an hour of their time. You know? So just that, and so give yourself lots of ammunition. So being as prepared as you possibly can, you know, behind the scenes, before the pitch, is actually of massive value when you're in there. Because people get, because you will be much more confident and much more knowledgeable. Okay, and people will pick up on that. Is anybody familiar with NLP?
Right.
Neuro-linguistic programming. Fantastic thing. Used appropriately and inappropriately. But how long does it take somebody to make a decision whether they like somebody else or not?
3 seconds.
Sorry?
3 seconds.
3 seconds?
Yes.
It's actually 0.9 of a second or something. The decision has been made before your brain has registered it. It goes back to animal instinct. Okay? Yeah, how many of you got a dog? Yeah? Have you been walking down the street and your dog all of a sudden just perks up and kind of gets all kind of like making itself as big as possible, and you're kind of like, what's going on? And before you, and you haven't even seen, they've sensed the dog and it's coming around the corner, right? It's that animal instinct that we have communicated out of our system because we can talk. So we've forgotten how to do this sort of stuff. So it's under a second is that decision. You've then got 9 seconds. The first 9 seconds of meeting somebody to actually change that decision, and the remaining 50 seconds of the minute to have an outside chance of influencing it if that first 9 seconds haven't worked. So just to give that an example, I've walked in the door, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, hi, I'm Sam. And I'm what? 10, 12 feet away? Yeah? So, and it comes from confidence. If you walk into a room and you nail it straight away, I'm Sam, and you eye contact straight away, positive attitude, confident but not cocky. You're confident because you've got a great idea. You're confident because you know your business, you know your market, you know exactly what you're going to do, and you know how you're going to do it, and you know exactly what Roberto wants to do because you've researched who is on the panel. So I know that you're a millionaire, that you specialised in X, and I know that you're a multimillionaire as well and you specialised in Y. I know that you like certain social things, but you don't. You're actually more interested in the business. The social output at the end of it is great for you, but what you really want to know is, I'm going to give you my money, I'm going to invest in you, in your company, but I want a return for it. You're not bothered. But you're prepared to invest 50,000, your maximum is 5. But I know that before I've walked in. So when I'm talking about a specific thing in my pitch, I'm addressing it to the key people that need to know about that. So I'm talking really big numbers. I'm not going to be having that conversation with you because your maximum is 5. So I'm talking about, yeah, so in order to do this, we need to buy a minibus, where we can put the soup kitchen in the back. Okay, and that's going to cost us £30,000. What are you going to do as an investor? You're going to go, well, that's me out. But you're going to be sat there going, oh, right, okay, And then I turn around and say, yeah, but what we then need is, but really to get this off the ground, is we need to test the product. So we need to go off and test recipes and do this, that, and the other, and we need 1,500 quid for raw materials, and we're going to hire a bus or a van or whatever it is for 1,000 quid, okay, and then we just need a slush fund of another 1,000, so that's £3,000. All of a sudden, you've switched off, but you're switched on. You play the room, play the people in front of you. That comes from knowledge of your product, but knowledge of your audience. Try your best to find out what their key drivers are before you've even got into the room, because that impresses the shit out of people. Somebody walks in and goes, I saw your post on Twitter the other day, I thought it was quite interesting. I've got an opinion on it, but maybe we can grab a coffee later and we can talk to you about it, or we can talk about it. Oh, okay, fine. Shit, It's a bit unnerving, but yeah, okay, so you've done your research, that's impressive. You're prepared, great. Tick in the box. Has anybody ever heard of somebody called Fru Hazlitt? The lady responsible for really building Yahoo's business in the UK in the late 90s, early noughties. She used to start her presentations, she used to come in on one of those electric scooters. Okay? Had absolutely nothing to do with Yahoo, absolutely nothing to do with her business and what she was coming to talk to you about, but damn did it get your attention. There's another guy who was one of the senior directors of M&C Saatchi Media Agency, and he's a part-time magician. All right, so he comes in, and you know, sometimes, depending on the pitch, he'll come in and he'll be wearing his top hat and his cape. And he'll come in and he'll spend the first 2 minutes doing a trick, because it just lightens the mood a little bit, you know, or he says it does. Right, but you've got to make sure that you're a damn good magician, because if you get the trick wrong, you're going to look, you know, don't run your business like you do your magic tricks or whatever. Yeah, you know, yeah, it's a real challenge. It's a real challenge. But actually, to be fair, you know, do you really want to be the first one? Because, you know, first up is probably just as tricky, because at that point they're kind of like ready to give somebody a bit of a pasting. Or I am anyway, every December. So see you, those of you who do this entrepreneurship module, I'll see you next Thursday. Yeah, try and think of something slightly different. But you have got something different, so because you've got a social model, a social idea, something that you want to change. So it could just be a few facts and figures. You know, you wanted to change the world. You wanted to feed homeless people in Oxford. Give a statistic. You know, did you know that for every hot meal that you eat during the year, you know, there are 3 times as many people who don't have a hot meal? And did you know that we could reduce the number of influenza and pneumonia cases in Oxford at the John Radcliffe and reduce the burden on the intensive care unit or the A&E unit by 30% if, you know, ex-kid or ex-homeless person had a hot meal every evening between September and March? A statistic like that, because it gets people going, and it's, you know, and it links straight into your business. Well, I can tell you that I can fix that problem, and this is how we're going to do it. Right, okay, you got my attention. Coming in and saying, hi, I'm John Smith and I sell beer. You know, it's not really what people want. Anything else? Any more questions?
So you said that investors often want to hear about your failures. So why is that, and why you should talk about it?
Well, I mean, I don't think they necessarily sit there and think they want to know about your failures. I think that don't be afraid of talking about your failures, because, you know, when you were a kid, okay, and you got your first bike, you jumped straight on your bike and you went off and rode around the block, didn't you?
Not quite.
No, you fell off. You know, and invariably you needed stabilizer pedals, and you needed your mum and dad to hold you while you cycled around the block. You know, we learn through experience. So, you know, and so, you know, you're talking about your failures in terms of the benefit that it's had on your experience. Yeah? You know, so it's not, don't focus on the negative. You know, I'm not saying in the pitching focus on the negative. So basically I failed 9 times, you know, the statistics say that it's, you know, 1 in 10 succeed, so this is my 10th shot at the title. You know, you guys should be confident. You know, it's more about actually, you know, I've learned a lot of lessons. This isn't the first business that I've tried to set up, you know, and I'm very conscious of why things haven't worked in the past. Some of them are my fault, some of them aren't, but it's all, you know, it's built me into the person that I am today, into the entrepreneur that I am today. You know, you will get an element of credibility from that. Okay.
I think it will also show, it will also demonstrate your passion not to give up.
Yeah, exactly.
It's an interesting analogy. As you know, the new Chancellor of the University is Catherine Granger. And I'll pose you this question. She won 3 Olympic silver medals before she, and most of you will have seen her at the launch event, before she won a gold medal. Were those 3 silver medals failure? She would regard them as failing. But for most, I mean, most of us don't even get to the Olympics, but the point I'm trying to make is really, failure is often qualified failure. It's not an absolute thing, I failed miserably enough. It's about, Failure is about degrees or lack of success, depending on how you set achievement. So you've got to qualify, I think, what you mean by failure. It's not abject failure necessarily. It's, well, this bit didn't work. We tried X, but that wasn't quite right. We need to look at that next time.
Yeah.
Does that make sense in terms of learning by your mistakes and failure?
Yeah. But again, it's knowing when to give up, and you know, one of the reasons why your idea didn't work was because you realised it wasn't going to work, and you decided to call it a day. And actually, with it, for a lot of people, for a lot of customers, investors, whatever, that's actually, you know, equally as important as whether the idea is sound. Because if you know when something's not working and you're not afraid to admit it, you're not going to waste their resources. And their resource is not only money, it's their time, and it's also their reputation. You know, people put their reputations on the line. You know, every single person that attends an Advantage 42 entrepreneurial skills program, you know, they come out of there and our reputation hinges on a lot of things. It hinges on whether they're successful in business, hinges on whether they go on to re-offend or not. You know, it hinges on whether they change their behaviour, whether they reform, whether some of them go off and get jobs, because it actually, thinking about themselves in an entrepreneurial way actually makes them more employable. It allows them to understand exactly where they fit within an organisation.
Can you give a couple of examples of the sort of businesses that you funded from these particular groups? I mean,
well, we haven't funded anything from our entrepreneurial skills program, but
no, I meant the offenders that you've supported.
Yeah. Okay. So, you know, in terms of so some of the things I told you about, the security guy, we've had a guy that basically went off and sold bottles of freshly squeezed orange juice at Lewisham Station every morning. We've had people who've done, you know, sort of catering businesses, Caribbean cookout businesses, you know, where they've set up catering. We've had a guy that made models out of matchsticks. You know, he did 30 years in prison, made a lot of matchstick models, but then his business idea, you know, his business idea was actually, I'm going to make these into flat pack versions, and I'm going to sell them to schools for kids to make in craft design and technology. So he put sheets. His idea was to match sheets and then get kids to cut them out with craft knives, but go in and talk to the kids, you know, and basically say, don't do what I did. So he was going to go into inner city schools and basically talk about the fact that he didn't pay attention at school, and he was the jack, the lad, and so on and so forth. And he ended up being an expert matcher. They call it matching. He ended up being an expert matcher, but only because he spent 30 years in prison, you know. And so there was his business wasn't a social business, but he wanted to get across a message. He wanted to do something, you know, positive. You know, so he's done that. We've had lots of people setting up mobile businesses, such as mobile hair salons. People wanting to go off and, you know, if you think about in a lot of rural villages, a lot of our activity tends to be in sort of rural areas, rural Yorkshire, rural Lincolnshire, rural Devon and Dorset and Cornwall, places like that, where mobility is a real key. Not only mobility for people getting to for regular people, but mobility for offenders to actually get to major conurbations where the jobs are. And then, you know, so we had a candidate in Wales who, you know, couldn't get a job, and you know, needed to kind of keep themselves busy because they had a habit of nicking things. And they realised themselves that when they were not busy was when they were at their most destructive when it came to nicking things. So they needed a job, but nobody would give them a job because they had a criminal record. But then what he realised was that he was actually quite handy at getting bargains. So he used to go off and he set up a little business where all the, you know, people who were immobile in his village, because it was an old mining village, there was a lot of older generations there, he did their shopping for them. And all he did was, he didn't get money from them, he traded. So he'd say, right, you know, so he'd get the list and it would be, you know, 10 items. He'd say, right, well, can I buy an extra loaf of bread? Yeah, no problem. So, you know, that's simplifying the model, but basically he fed himself by doing other people's shopping. It's quite an interesting idea. A few personal trainers. We've had people who have designed websites. We had one guy who designed an app, basically for consolidating, or wanted to design an app for consolidating food orders. He gave that idea up and actually now is working for a restaurant chain, because shortly after that another app came out. I can't remember what it is that consolidates.
Just Eat.
Just Eat came out. You know, so he wasn't ahead of the game as much as he thought. What else have we done? We've had a couple of guys set up market stalls. You know, all bread and butter businesses. You know, there's no Marslanders in there. You know, but then, you know, that's not really what entrepreneurialism is. It's people actually getting out there, rolling their sleeves up and grafting.
You incubate. To what stage do you just give them fund and then incubate, or you just give them?
No, we don't give them funding. We give them support. So basically, they set up their businesses, or they have their idea, and we support them in getting that idea off the ground. So if they need to go and get some grant funding to set themselves up, in a lot of instances there is small amounts of money for people through business innovation and skills to set up their own business. You know, we'll help them write those application forms. We'll go along and be character references or witnesses for them. We'll help them set up bank accounts. We'll provide them with the mentoring, the support that happens with that. We'll introduce them to investors when their idea has been validated. You know, but we don't take any equity stake in any of those businesses, because for us that's unethical. You know, why should we profit potentially off somebody else's idea when the whole point of us doing what we do is to actually help them? So I'm sorry, but I don't want, if their business succeeds and they make millions and they become far richer than me, happy days. You know, our modus operandi was actually to give them the ability, or give them the platform to go off and be able to do that, as opposed to benefiting from their success. And hopefully they'll remember us and take us on their yacht every summer, and maybe if they're really rich, buy me a Porsche again, because I would dearly love one. You know, but you know, it's just kind of, you know, that's the way it rolls.
For me, what interests me about social enterprise is not necessarily the product or the service, but actually how that product or service is delivered and the beneficiaries of that. Is that something that you find difficult to convey in a pitch?
No, for us, but I can see how it can be difficult for some ideas. And I think that again, it comes down to the preparation, you know, because you know who you're pitching to, and you know what your product is, so you've got absolute clarity. So you can adjust your pitch to the people that you're in front of at any one particular time. So our pitch to government is very, very different to our pitch to the private sector, and our pitch to small businesses is a lot different to our pitch for big business. You know, and the way we do our business in the Middle East is very, very different to the way we do our business in the UK. And dealing with Americans, okay, is you know, the cultural differences, the business cultural differences between Europe and the US are quite stark in many respects. Okay, but trying to help an American company do business in the Middle East, you know, is a real challenge. So, you know, but your pitch is totally different. But that's knowing your product and being confident in that product, and also knowing your customer, and your customer is your investor, your customer is who's going to be buying your product. Because you're able to you will be able to define very, very quickly what's important to say and what's not. You know, your pitch should be different every time you make it, because you're learning the lessons. You're watching the body language of the people in front of you. So I've been watching what a lot of you are doing today. Some of you are kind of sat there rolling your eyes. Some of you are sat there looking at your phones. Some of you are taking notes. Some of you haven't taken a note already, but you haven't stopped looking. You know, it's the body language. So I know whose attention I've got and whose I haven't. Okay, so now the next time I do a talk like this, I'll have learned those lessons, because I've spotted occasionally when because your body language is the reaction to what I'm saying. So sometimes I've sparked somebody into attention, you've leaned forward and raised your, you know, lifted your heads, whereas previously you were sat back slouched. Have I said something that has actually triggered something in you? What was that? So I've got to go, well, I go away after this, and every time I talk like this, I talk differently. There's a different approach. Sometimes I'm really aggressive. And I get told all the time, I've been told plenty of times by Roberta and Jeffrey to stop being so aggressive, because sometimes I come in and I pitch and I'm kind of like, this is my social message. Yeah, this is why we do what we do, and this is why it's important that you listen to me and buy into what I do. And actually that can be counterproductive, because the passion becomes too much and the insight is lessened, because I'm overwhelming you with why I do it. Go ahead.
Can I ask a bit more about your business model? I'm trying to understand what you do. So you have some core business that you do for commercial companies, very commercial companies, and then you run a program of social enterprise as well. Are these integrated, or could they be completely separate? I'm not going to be social, I'm going to be anti-social entrepreneur.
Yeah, they could be separate. They are integrated, and we would like them to be integrated, because the only way that the program, the entrepreneurial programs can run is because of the money that we're funding them with through our commercial activity. But you know, I guess if we stopped doing that, would the program still be able to be run? Yeah, they could, but we would be heavily reliant on government funding, or the funding of philanthropic investors. And that's really, you know, to be fair for us, if we can fund it ourselves, then actually that means that the central government funding and the philanthropic investor cash can actually be used for things that can't be self-funding. Because there are certain ideas out there and certain social objectives that just simply do not fit with the social enterprise model, and actually they're the ones that deserve the grant funding cash. So, you know, but could we turn around one day and say we're not doing that anymore? Absolutely. You know, and it's something that we talk about pretty much every year. At the end of our, you know, normally around about, you know, December, January, we have a discussion internally. You know, is this something that we still want to do? You know, because once the answer to that question is no, then we stop doing it.
This is right. It's an interesting question, because there's a lot of, you know, literature on different business models, and how much the social mission is baked into the business model varies from, you know, 15, it's run by the people that are trying to, you know, the employees are the beneficiaries, sure, or something like Sam does, or something like the one that the guy that does the Staples business up in Scotland, where the business is completely separate, just generates money to achieve the social mission, which is a completely different field. Yeah. So you go that extreme to the extreme in the middle, or the other extreme, where everything is baked in. Usually the more elegant model, not necessarily the right, there's no right or wrong model. The more elegant model is the more you bake into the business, okay, the better, but it's not.
Yeah, I mean, there are key themes in what we do day to day commercially that are replicated in what we do socially. So, you know, we bring the latest experience that we have in terms of, you know, innovation, solution design, commercial reality into our courses. So we don't actually teach a syllabus. We have a framework, and that framework, the content of that framework in the program changes depending on what's actually going on in the wider economy and what we're learning. Okay? So I guess the key themes are, you know, we design solutions to make businesses successful in our commercial business. You know, so we take some of those lessons and those approaches and we apply them to the entrepreneurial, put them into an entrepreneurial context and say, well, actually, you know, this is where the synergies lie. And I guess if we separated the two, we might lose that. You know, because every associate of Advantage 42 needs to commit to giving a certain amount of their time to the entrepreneurial skills program. You know, and if you know, so you've got to be an entrepreneur to be one of our associates, successful entrepreneur or a failed entrepreneur. You know, as long as you know what you're talking about and you're pretty sound, then we'll give you a try. But crucially, you've got to give time to the social objectives. And if you're not interested in doing that, we'll go work for Accenture. You know, and if really what motivates you is pinstripe suits and Ferraris and dinner at the Ivy every Friday night, well, you know, fill your boots. Who am I to tell you that you can't do that? You know.
So your social entrepreneurs give their time freely. It's not as though you take money for your ideas, that you give advice to professional companies, and then you're using the same people and the same models, but you give this freely.
No, no, no. So our associates are paid by Advantage 42 to deliver the entrepreneurial workshops. Oh, right. Okay, but they are paid. So if your day rate is £1,000 a day, you're paid a percentage, a very low percentage of your day rate to deliver an entrepreneurial skills program. Okay, we don't take commercially sensitive information, so intellectual property.
Business model, say. But then again, I suppose every model's different. Every
model's different. Yeah, we basically, like I say, you know, the entrepreneurial skills program is a framework. The content of that framework changes depending on when it's been delivered and the wider environment and the context in which it's been delivered. And crucially, we adapt it to the people that are in the room at the time. You know, so sometimes we've gone into a room and we've had people who just want to be self-employed landscape gardeners. You know, and you try and, if you're in Sleaford in Lincolnshire and you've got 30 people wanting to be a landscape gardener and the population of Sleaford is like 3,000 or something, you know, you can't, like, you've got to sit there and say, whoa, hang on a second, there's only actually room for maybe how many landscape gardeners are there in Sleaford already? Well, there's 300, right? Well, actually, you need to think about your idea a little bit more. You know, maybe not be a landscape gardener. So, you know, but we can adapt and we can change how the program is delivered, but it is fed by the experience that our associates have. Not only their personal experience of running their own businesses, but the experience that they have in terms of, you know, being in with a client the day before. Or, you know, I'm stood here now in front of you, and for the last 10 days I've been in the middle of the bloody desert in Saudi Arabia. You know, like, you know, and I'm sort of, you know, you put things into perspective. I haven't really thought about the social objectives of Advantage 42 for the last 10 days. You know, I've kind of been worried about not being bitten by scorpions and getting, you know, blisters on my feet from wandering around in the sand, to be honest, or being shot at. I had an armed guard for 3 days. I was kind of like a bit odd, really. You know, IS. Anyway. From my personal view, from social enterprise, and I'm conscious of the time and your time, I would have your business model, which is a social enterprise, and it has how you're going to make your money and have your business sustainable, and what you're going to run that is going to be socially focused, and what benefit that's going to have a particular target group. Okay, you would have a business model, so it would have how the finances worked. Okay, but you would need to understand, you know, what costs are attributed where. Okay, so in our business, we know that whilst we give up to 40% of our profit into our entrepreneurial skills program, around 50% of our cost as a business comes in funding it. Okay, because what we think we're giving and what we actually give are invariably two different things, but we can't forecast that because I can't turn around to Roberto and say, you know, yeah, I'll help you set up your business, but I'm only going to give you 15 hours before I even know what your business idea is, and before I know exactly how prepared you are and exactly, you know, what you need from me. It might be 30 hours. So I have to make an open-ended commitment. So at the end of the year, when we actually look at the cost of delivering the entrepreneurial skills program, if we've said, you know, we've given £100,000, or we've run £100,000 worth of course programs, is what we've committed to, probably, you know, close to £120,000. Because we've had to fire in an extra associate for a couple of days to go off and do an open surgery day in Sleaford to talk to all the landscape gardeners. Well, look, guys, thank you very much for your time today. I appreciate it. Good luck with your endeavours. Okay, I'm Sam Wood, Advantage 42. Thank you.